Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Sivadas Madhavan, Associate Professor of English. Today I'm going to talk about the origin of English language. The other day we have seen the origin of language. Today we are going to see where English belongs to. So that is the roots of English, the roots of English language. And the slide that I have made, you can see on the screen, is mainly the handwritten notes. It may be very awkward to the people who are not familiar with these historical points, but it is easy for you to get the points to help you to look into the matter clearly. You will come to know what happened during this time. Actually, when we talk about English, English has almost 1,500 years history. Or we can say from 450 up to the present 2023. That means from 5th century up to 21st century. That's the time of English language. But before that, let us go into the history. You see, the place called England was not there before 450 or 410. So once I asked a student of mine, where was England before 450 or 410? And the student was confused. It was because he didn't know the historical events that led to the beginning of English language. Not only English language, the land of the people who speak English. Actually, the original people who stayed in Britain before Julius Caesar attacked Britain in 55 BC. Celts were the original people. Celts were the tribes who were living in Britain. And when Romans came, they were not able to conquer the area or conquer Celts, but it took time. Later, by 43 AD, they were able to stay there. They were able to come and conquer the land called Britain. So Celts were compelled to surrender, or they were to go away, move away from the place where Romans came. And when Romans came, it was a time of the Christian religion also. Christianity was also brought to Britain by the Roman rulers. So Christianity came, not only Christianity, their language also came. Latin came to England. And they lived there for a long time. That was the Romanized Britons, or the people were called the Romanized Britons. Britons means the people of Britain. So they were Romanized means Romans came, they mingled with the local people, they conquered the local people, stayed there, their culture came, and their religion also came. And it continued up to 450. And then comes the new tribes from Germany. Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came and tried to settle in Britain. By then, because of many historical reasons, Romans had to leave. Romans left. And when Romans left, Anglo-Saxons and Jutes stayed there, and the mixture of the language of Anglo-Saxons and Jutes is called Old English or Anglo-Saxon. So the language was called English because it refers to the people who spoke the language, Angles. So language of Angles is English, and land where Angles stayed is called England. Land of Angles is England, language of Angles is called English. But not only Angles, Angles, Saxons and Jutes. These are the three main tribes who came from Germany and settled there after Romans. So Romanized Britons became Anglicized Britons. So people were Anglicized. People began to use English now. That is, the language of Angles is English, land of Angles is England. So before these Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came, there was no England. It was Britain. Britain became England. But even now people say Britain or Great Britain for the same place. So England is the land of Anglo-Saxons and Jutes who came there. So Celts disappeared, Romans disappeared, and Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came. And they continued up to 11th century. That is, to be precise, 1066. In 1066, William of Normandy conquered England. That is, French people attacked England and conquered England, and they put up their rule. William of Normandy, who became the ruler in England, didn't know even a single syllable of English. So he brought French language. So French became the official language. So during the Middle Ages, French language became the official language. And even though Romans left, Latin stayed as the religious language, but common people, the poor people in England, were using English. So they had a three-language system. Common people used English, church people used Latin, and official language was French. And French continued for a long time, almost many centuries. So later, in 1500, during Renaissance, things changed, and so many political changes took place, cultural changes took place, because mainly because of Renaissance. Renaissance was a movement in 14th, 15th and 16th centuries to revive art, culture, education, etc. And that is the beginning of the modern time. That is 15th century onwards, we call it modern English. And 15th century up to 18th century, 19th century, that is 1500 to 1800, is called the early modern English time. Modern English from 1500 onwards, but the early modern English time is from 1500 to 1800. 1500 is the time when Renaissance reached England, and 1800 is the time when Industrial Revolution started and it began to make changes. Not only Industrial Revolution, political changes, colonization, and scientific advancement. These are the things that took place in 1800 that marked the beginning of the late modern English period. So these are the three things that you have to remember. First, Romanized Britons, next Anglicized Britons, and then Franco-British language. That is, French language was imposed on Englishmen, and it became their official language for many centuries, and later, because of the political influence or political changes and Renaissance, English got the upper hand and the modern English started, and there are so many other funny stories related to that. We will come up with such stories later. So sometimes history shows funny things to us. And now we can see, you see, Britain colonized India, and India was ruled by the British East India Company for a long time. And at that time, the British prime ministers were poking fun at poor Indians. But now history has a sweet revenge. Now a man of Indian origin, Rishi Sunak, is the prime minister of Britain. So that's very funny to see the ways of history. So anyhow, our point is the beginning of English language. In the early days, that means in the 1st century BC, Romans started attacking England, and by 43 AD, Romans were able to settle in Britain, and they continued up to 450. That was the time of Romans, and Latin language came there. And then 450 onwards, Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came, that is the time of Old English, and Old English is called the forefather of English, or that is the early stage of English language. And before that there was no English. It was Latin language they were using at the time of Romans, and before that Celts had their own language. And when Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came, their language is called the Old English, or it is called the Anglo-Saxon, and it continued up to 1066. 1066 is the time of Norman conquest, and from 1066 onwards up to 1500, that is from 11th century up to 1500, it was Middle English. And during Middle English they had the three language system, that is official language was French, church language was Latin, and common people were using English. So this three language system was there, and English was considered the low class language. Only poor men used it. And modern English started in 1500. Chaucer was known as the father of English poetry, or some people said Chaucer was the father of English, because he was the person known as the modern writer in those days. But still, early modern English was not like the present day English. It was the crude form. As we look into Chaucer's work, it is not exactly the modern English as we use it now. And that change is there. And in 1800, because of political changes, because of industrial revolution, scientific advancement, colonization, etc., the modern English, that is late modern English, started. And from 1800 till now, it is called the present day, the modern English. That's all about the roots of English, or the origin of English language. We will come up with some other topic next time. Until then, goodbye.